founder and CEO of My HR Partner. And they are a dedicated partner for all things HR, providing supplemental support to comprehensive HR solutions to their clients. Her role as CEO entails oversight of the organization and representing My HR Partner through her involvement in the community, nationwide speaking engagements, and writing her monthly newspaper column for McCall.com and for Inc.com. She is also involved in the Global Entrepreneurs Organization. Prior to founding My HR Partner, Tina was the owner-operator of a small staffing franchise. After a corporate merger, Tina took advantage of sellback opportunity, completed her PHR certification during this time, and founded My HR Partner, Inc. in 2002. Tina resides in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and is an empty nester after raising her 2 children. We also have Kristen Kunath, also from My HR Partner. She's the Director of Hiring. She joined My HR Partner in 2021 as part of the hiring management team, bringing more than 15 years of corporate recruiting and client service experience. Fresh out of Rider University with her Bachelor of Science in Human Resources Management and Business Administration, she joined T-Mobile's engineering recruiting team and grew from a coordinator to a regional recruiter. With her passion for helping others, she's worked with companies throughout her career to match the right talent to the right role, helping people build careers they love. Kristen resides in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where she enjoys as much time outside as possible, usually going on an adventure with her dog or playing in the garden. We also have with us today Barbara Kirk. She's a partner at Shortlisted, where they work with companies to support their engineering, AI, and ML, product and executive level hiring. With extensive experience at technology leaders, Stripe, Samsara, VMware, and LinkedIn, Barbara has built a reputation as a trusted partner who delivers tailored solutions for her clients' critical hiring needs. She employs a holistic approach to leadership and team building. And personally, she is a devoted wife, mother, and passionate yoga enthusiast. And finally, our moderator for today's event is Kenneth Summers. Ken brings more than 40 years of human resources and line executive and practitioner experience to his client relationships. Ken earned a BA in English literature and an MSBA from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. In addition to the US, he's lived and worked across multiple industries in 6 countries. Consequently, there are very few situations that he has not previously navigated with his clients. While Ken has worked with many different kinds of functional leaders, he has a particular passion for helping HR practitioners who are committed to increasing their organizational influence and impact. As a consummate networker, he can draw on resources and solutions literally from around the planet. He lives with his spouse and their 15-year-old puppy in Groton, Connecticut. With that, Ken, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Stephanie, and good afternoon, everyone. I'll tell you very quickly, if you hear a little snoring, it is the geriatric puppy just enjoying life nearby. So apologies if that intrudes. So we're going to keep this flexible. I'm gonna pretend to be moderator. I'll be asking the panelists some questions, but I want to encourage the panelists to please jump in if Barbara's answering her question and Tina or Kristen have a perspective. Please jump in. We'll keep it relatively loose. As you know, this session is focused on technology and talent management with a particular emphasis today on the talent acquisition dimension of talent management. And I could go on and on about how big and complex talent management is as a topic. This is really focused on acquisition, the acquisition dimension of talent management. So without further ado, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to start with Barbara. Barbara, please tell us just a little bit about your business, what services that you provide, and what sets you apart from others in the field.
Yeah, we take a bespoke approach to search and recruiting advisory. I would say it's very specialized hiring. As mentioned, technical and executive levels, often for startups and scaling businesses. And it's very collaborative, very research driven, very consultative. And that's emulative of our in-house experience now in this moment of transition to apply our craft to smaller companies at a faster pace. So again, it's search and advisory, and we come in and fill roles often within 6 to 7 weeks. We're very proud to uphold 100% search to offer a success rate, particularly in these really challenging, hard to fill roles. And then as far as advisory, it's often in the form of interim talent acquisition leadership, enabling teams, driving hiring initiatives, just making sure that we're setting them up for success to have a long-term successful talent strategy that supersedes, us ultimately as they scale to build an in-house team. What sets us apart is that deep level of commitment to collaboration, a rigorous search methodology, and a first principles approach to recruiting. So unlike transactional contingent firms, our clients are true partners, and we employ a mutual commitment to that partnership and solving these challenging hurdles. Most contingent firms, they focus on volume, and they're not necessarily in a position to take on the most challenging roles. And so having a very focused approach around deep collaboration is what sets us apart. It's a partnership, not a service.
Great, thank you. And Tina, would you do the same for to represent my HR partner?
Sure. So I'll just give you a brief, it's easier to almost to give you a brief story. So when I started the company 23 years ago, I had owned a staffing service franchise that I sold, as Kenna mentioned. And I had this idea because a lot of the companies that would contact us, specifically small and mid-size, they needed a lot more than what we could offer because, we're offering help with placing people, but not necessarily really understanding the companies and digging deep. And so I came up with this idea of 23 years ago. The word outsourcing wasn't a word that is commonly used in business. But in essence, that's what it was. We just called it something different back then. And so we went in, we went into companies, and I created this process where we go in, we really deeply understand who they are. And we have this very defined process to do that. And then we act on their behalf to do the work of hiring. So we're not charging placement fees. We're not a staffing service. We don't have a database of employees. We're literally acting in the role of as HR, as an internal HR doing the hiring. From there, the business expanded. We started seeing some companies were still having issues with turnover, and we realized there was things missing, real basic HR fundamental things. I never intended to grow this into an HR company. I'm not an HR person. I'm an entrepreneur that started this company, and it became an HR company. And little by little, we started adding things, and clients just started demanding more and more and more. Here we are today. We're in 43 states around the country. We have 41 employees. We'll have 50 by the end of the year. We're growing exponentially and offering full or partial HR services, and then hiring, what we call hiring management services, which in essence is outsourced hiring.
Thank you, Tina.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so let's get into the meat of today's discussion. Barbara, I'm going to go back to you to start us. You recently built an AI model to improve the efficiency of your recruitment activities. Can you tell us about it, how it works, and the kinds of outcomes that you've achieved?
Yes, I was partnering with a client, and they had a list of 10 competencies that they wanted for their product managers, which was significantly impacting the candidate progression from resume review to recruiter screen to hiring manager interviews. And nearly every candidate that the recruiters presented lacked certain skills, and they were focused a lot on what they lacked as opposed to what they did have, and having a sense of curiosity to further assess what they did have. While I have great empathy and that, those competencies felt very relevant to them, it wasn't closely connected to the talent market and what they could actually get. And so while intended to keep a high bar, it precluded them from a good deal of candidates. And when employers really set overly narrow profile requirements that don't align with the total addressable market, they truly limit how many candidates they can engage and ultimately their velocity of being able to hire. So this client needed a very systematic approach, framework-driven structure, if you will, for us to be able to really highlight exactly what competencies candidates bring to the table, where their gaps are, and why they should or shouldn't move forward. So I trained a GPT to improve interview to offer pass-through rate that resulted in a 53% conversion and change in 4 months. And so what I did is I looked at, okay, what are the resume qualities that the company valued? How do I map those to the 10 competencies? And these often weren't explicit. It was more of, okay, here are the types of schools, here are the types of companies, degrees, job titles, entrepreneurial stints, things that you wouldn't necessarily put in a job description, but it was part of the profile criteria that they were defining. And then for each of these qualities, I put a weighted score. It was either a 1 point for certain attributes and 2 points for more important attributes. And the total score possible was 14. I sampled people who were high performing in the role and then also people who had progressed very far in the interview stages and discerned that 9 was the minimum threshold for someone to pass through. And so it really brought a quantitative data point to what was otherwise a qualitative insight. And LLMs, they're very conversational. I don't proclaim to be an expert in it. I'm still learning, like all of us, because AI is so new. But making sure that you can prompt it based on what you're looking for, and then telling the GPT to write its own instructions when you're training that model is also an important detail that really helped us be able to just quickly type in, score this candidate to this level product manager, and you get a numerical score that then again helped with pass-through rate improvement.
That's great. Thank you, Barbara. And I presume you've been able to adapt it to use this tool with other clients.
Yes, I have. The weighted scoring is really helpful. I think just human beings, we have conscious and unconscious biases. And as we're looking and evaluating resumes, we employ judgment. We'd like to think that that judgment would be consistent day over day, week over week, but we are human after all. So if you can balance a tool that is bringing quantitative data with a qualitative insight or perspective of a human being, I feel it brings the best of both worlds.
Great. Thank you. So let me stay with you, Barbara. With so many tech tools available for job seekers, what changes have you seen in the way the job seekers look for jobs? And how are you seeing candidates use AI specifically in the job seeking process?
Yeah, they're using it at every stage. And I think it's very important for employers to recognize that. Naturally, too, as they're utilizing AI for crafting cold message outreach, optimizing their resume to the ATS, and preparing for their interviews, it also introduces risks that candidates might potentially misrepresent their experience. So we do have to stay vigilant. There's generally 2 areas, though, the resume optimization and the interview prep. So there's lots of builder tools, Teal, ResumeMaker.ai, ATSfriendly.com. These are just to name a few where you can tailor your resume to fit a job description. And then there's also auto apply tools where you can have samples of job descriptions and then it matches your resume, so then it will automatically apply for you. So it's a bit of a hands-off approach, I would say, for candidates. But again, that misrepresentation is certainly a risk. And so you want to make sure that you're having an appropriate level of human intervention to make those evaluations. Also, sometimes this leads to higher volume. And so therefore, employers are positioned to maybe not post the job as long as they should, reducing exposure of the opportunity to candidates who might otherwise be a fit. Really gone are the days or demanding roles being posted for weeks. Now it's sometimes higher hours for in-demand roles. So AI is a great tool for top of funnel for both candidates and employers, but focusing on discoverability and using your own pre-screening, sometimes they're called knockout questions, that you can integrate into your ATS, or even open text fields as candidates would have to complete that, helping give context to their experience. As long as you have a structured way to evaluate those, AI bots can't complete that the same way they can just a click apply pass through situation. So the other piece is interview prep, and they rehearse and fine tune. And I mean, this isn't new. People did it even without AI. But I have found in my own interviewing and also working with my clients, it's all in the follow-up questions. So they tend to get the first question really well in the rehearse. But when you ask clarifications and help me understand this deeper, or talk to me about what the perception was or the experience was from the person that you were partnering with in that situation, just to name some examples, that's when often you start to see the real people. AI is commoditized. It's in that direction. And so it's a great equalizer, I would say, in written form and different tools to help automate from a task standpoint. But people still hire people. And in those follow-up questions, you get to know the real person.
Can I add in something there? That was
Yes,
so good,
please.
Barbara, if you don't mind. Just piggybacking, because everything Barbara said was so spot on. And I learned some things too, so thank you for that. You know, there was somebody I interviewed not long ago for one of our internal positions, and he was answering questions looking at a second screen you could see because his head would go back and forth. And, you know, I don't know if he was was listening to my answers and the AI was typing in the answers. So one of the things we've been careful to do is we're remote. You know, we have 41 employees remote around the country, but we're interviewing via Zoom. A lot of companies are interviewing via Zoom, but we're still inviting the people in, even if we have to fly them in for most, not every position, but for most, because once you have them in person again, like Barbara was saying, they can't, the follow-up questions, but also seeing them in 3D, there's no screen, there's no possibility. So it's just an idea that I want to offer out there that, still keep meeting people. That Zoom, if it's 100% Zoom, you take a chance.
Yeah, if you can bring people in, it's gold standard, right? There are companies where they have a distributed workforce where they're not able to do that at scale. There was a security company recently that found that they were actually interviewing an AI generated person, and they didn't discover it till the final stages when they asked the candidate to put the hand over their face, because an AI can't do that. It also can't turn your head to the right or the left. And so, I assume good intent, but it's strange that they didn't discover it until the final interview. But there is going to be a movement of how do you have human identification in a live interview if it is virtual. So again, there's a lot of things we know, but there's also a lot of things we don't know.
This is great. You guys anticipated me because I was going to ask about what kind of challenges the employer will face now that candidates are using all these tools, but the two of you address that really well. Is there anything you might want to add to that, or?
Yeah, your brand has to align really well. In a world where AI tools commoditize communication, even style, the human element of how your brand is received to candidates is more important than ever. So having something that's compelling and authentic that really differentiates you from competitors is really important, and helps you evaluate if someone's just, putting a spam of interest out there versus them actually wanting your opportunity. I alluded to volume earlier, and just the candidate volume is going to increase, period. And it will, in some cases, deter employers from considering applicants as a whole for certain types of roles or situations. So just be really mindful around how you're spending your time as well on other channels, source talent and referred talent. Relying too heavily on volume-driven strategies, considering rather the unique qualities and experience of each candidate is critical. So just be mindful of how you're spending your time on that volume, because you might think you're getting 1,000 resumes, but it doesn't mean even 1% of them are a fit, unfortunately, thanks to AI. I also think it's important to know your ATS, know its limitations, know its search capabilities, so then you can tailor your behaviors appropriately. And yeah, the key takeaway from that is ATSs are not foolproof, and many of them are antiquated. So yeah, those are call outs for me. Tina, Kristen, didn't know if you had others on your mind.
Well,
Yeah.
go ahead, please. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think, with all of the talk of AI, before I get into a couple things, it's really important to remember that candidates know we have AI. So just as much as they're using it, they know we have those tools. So increased communication is now expected. They know how easy it is to do, but they're still really looking for that personal connection. Nobody wants to feel like their resume was screened by a bot. Nobody wants to feel like they're, in a thank you email for an interview by a bot. They still want that personal connection. And they want AI to really help them, kind of find the efficiencies, just like we want to find the efficiencies. So one thing that I will probably say over and over again today is make sure that you're using it to create, meaningful connections, and you still have to find to connect to candidates. One of the things, and I know Tina has mentioned this throughout my time here in the hiring process, and I've been able to witness it, is AI can write some great sounding job ads, but a lot of times it's a lot of buzzwords. It doesn't necessarily capture your voice. And one of the things that we're so mindful of is our ads, we want to be in our voice. For our company, we're fun. We really try to challenge the status quo. And so we create an ad that speaks to people that hopefully that attracts. And I want to say probably in more than 50 to 60% of our interviews when we first start talking to candidates, Tina, you've probably heard it pretty high on the candidates that get to the end stage. They're attracted by our ads. I loved your personality. It really stood out. And AI might be able to give us some ideas in that, but it can't capture that essence. Same way, like we were actually just hiring an attorney. We have an offer going out today. And, the one candidate that really just rose to the top wasn't the candidate that looked perfect on paper, but had everything else that really came together. And one of the first things he said is this didn't feel like an ad for any other attorney. Like I knew this place was different. And it worked. We attracted the right person and got through the process with that. So, as much as we talk about these tools is how do we bring that back in? How do we utilize the tools to help gain efficiencies and qualities? But also how do we continue to build and now enhance that human connection piece to it that I think gets lost in a lot of the AI conversations.
And pardon me, good grief. Kristen, I'm going to just follow up with a slightly different angle. Can you talk about how employers can best respond to the changing candidate expectations? Kristen touched on it in terms of, they know we have AI and we know they have AI, but how should employers handle that? What tools, resources should employers be leveraging for the best success?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that we have to work through that, and some of it is using those tools right back. One thing that we are in a practice of doing now is running all of our interview questions and everything through AI, to see what are the standard response rates that are getting spit out, what follow-up questions, what do we need to do to kind of make it more real, and how do we recognize, some of those pieces of it. So it's something as simple as running your process through to understand what's the candidate experience when they engage in your process. How are they going to be utilizing those tools? I think some of the other pieces too, it gets really important in terms of virtual interviews, different tools that we can utilize from one-way interviews all the way through the hiring process, getting into assessments, and how we utilize those and how those impact it. So with AI, you're getting more and more candidates coming in. So one tool that we adopted quite a while ago, before it was really popular, was the one-way video interviews. And in that, we have high volume positions, even low volume positions, depending upon what the position. If we really get benefit from seeing how somebody presents themselves, seeing how they engage and how they communicate, seeing if their background's professional and how they approach the interview, it's been a really great tool for us to be able to really give candidates a chance to sell themselves. Same thing with assessments. It gives typically a slightly more unbiased, though there are some concerns with some assessments, but it does give you some more of that predictive pieces where you can map different competencies and proficiencies to it. But one thing we do want to strongly advise to be aware of with that is that even as much as we can utilize these tools to help speed up the process or to create more touch points, they do bring their own inherent biases into it. AI learns from itself. It learns from some of the things that we feed it, which has some biases built into that as well. Assessment tools, whether you're testing for technical skills and having them run through different scenarios, or whether it's personality based, those don't work for every job. And you do need to be mindful of what you're using and how much we rely on that. I know a lot of times you're like, oh, it's a pass-fail assessment, and there's a lot of different nuances that may not capture everything. So, as we look to utilize these tools, we really do have to understand some of those weak points.
Right. And Kristen, you talked briefly about one-way interviews and how valuable they've been to you. Could you just, because I saw a couple of faces in the video kind of scrunch up, not really understanding what a one-way interview is. Could you get just a little mechanical for us?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for asking for clarification there. So with our one-way videos, what that is, we use this platform called Spark Hire, but there's a number of other ones that are out there. We use it very early on in the interview process. So it kind of acts as an additional screening step for us. And what it is a platform where we go, we can put the job description in, we can kind of brand the page and everything. And then they get a little intro video that we've created, welcoming them to the process and explaining what the process is. Which essentially the questions that we create, usually it's anywhere from 3 to 5. We do recommend them to be shorter. You don't want to ask candidates to invest too much time into it, but they're read. We record ourselves reading the question, one question at a time. And you can set parameters, whether you want to leave them unlimited think time, which is something we used to do. And now with AI and everything else coming in, we want to limit that. So you can set parameters, which how much think time they're going to get, how many takes they can take, if they want to just record it one and done and just roll with it, or if you want to give them a couple of opportunities. But basically, they record themselves answering your questions. And once completed, you get notified and you can hit play. And, sometimes we're watching them at 1.5 times speed. So we can get through some of those videos a little bit faster and see how candidates are portraying themselves. But again, that comes into, how many of those candidates are now running those questions through AI to spit out something that sounds great. So we still have to be very mindful of. And then, of course, with that comes bias, and we have to make sure that we're training everybody in the hiring process, not just our team, hiring managers and everyone else, to make sure that we are aware of that and mitigating for that as best as possible, because we are humans, and we have to make sure that we're doing what we can to work around that.
And it's a huge, I want to mention, it's not for every job. As Kristen mentioned, like blue collar jobs, people just won't do it. But people are used to talking on their phones now, where a few years ago, it was a little harder to get it going. But man, oh man, it is so beneficial. You get, so many resumes, you're looking at them, you're on the fence, to take the time to do phone interviews, it's time consuming. So sometimes people will put somebody aside as a maybe, or not interview them at all. Well, here you can send them a link to do a one-way video interview. It's a recorded, by the way. You can do it in a lot of ways, but the way we like to do is recorded, right, Kristen? It's recorded of like, so Kristen's face asking the question, and they have up to 3 times the answer. And people actually, our feedback's really good. We get tremendous response from people, and so now she sends out all these links, and in the morning, wakes up and there's, 10 video interviews that were completed.
Wow.
It saves so much time. It's actually giving more people a chance to apply. Where if you're with somebody like, I really don't know, give them that chance. It costs you nothing. There's no extra cost per interview. You pay for like a monthly investment, and it's unlimited. So it's hugely valuable. And again, as long as people are trained to use it so that they're not using it to discriminate, you got to be very careful of that. But otherwise, unbelievably helpful.
And the one thing to add to that is, this is where it is important to have your employer branding on spot, because we get a lot of people that look at us and say, I'm so excited. I really want to be a part of this. They're engaged from the ad, doing their research and what they see. So they're really excited to do that. We work with that with a lot of our clients too. So, if you're just reading a resume, if you don't have a presence out there and you send them a link, a candidate is much less likely to buy into that. So being aware of that and making sure that you have an ad that captures their attention and really engages them in a different way. And when you invite them to video, like, what are you including in that email or that reach out to continue enticing them if you're going to ask them for that time? And, that's something that we really have to be mindful of too, and get them excited to complete. And I think that's why we've had a pretty high success rate in that as well. Again, it's not just the tool itself, but how you deploy it.
And I'm just going to add real quick is, and I don't want to go too far off, but you mentioned branding. I think Barbara also mentioned branding earlier. Branding is so important, and we spend a lot of time with our clients making sure they're branded properly, but doing things like, and I know this isn't necessarily to talk, but it is about talent acquisition and Glassdoor, making sure your Glassdoor is up to date. It has information. You don't even have to spend money on Glassdoor. You can use the free version. It's enough. You can put pictures on there, make sure your employees are doing reviews. You can ask applicants to give you reviews. People do use it. Same as Google and same as having something on your website, basic talent, something about what it is to work there and the work experience there, at least a page, if not several pages on that experience, because people are looking at all that. And this isn't fluff. Like, I'm not trying to sell you anything. We're not a marketing company. This is real. Like, people want to know who they're going to work with. And so the things like Glassdoor and Google having a career site, that's what I was trying to say earlier, on your webpage, and then having an ad that reflects all of those things, all of it coming together so that the truth of who you are is consistent and they feel more trust, versus your Glassdoor has a bunch of really bad reviews and your ads or whatever, your website maybe doesn't even have a careers page and your ads are saying something that maybe other people are saying you're not. That will backfire on you. So I could go down a rabbit hole with all that, but it's really important.
No, and in fact, I'm going to go off script a little bit here, and branding has come up a couple of times, and I want to invite our panelists to, well, Tina, you just did, but Kristen and Barbara, if you want to add anything about the importance of branding, any suggestions you can offer our participants today in terms of how they can make their branding more impactful.
Well, along the lines of videos, I did a Meet the Manager campaign one time. It was helping educate about certain functions, even certain roles, and they spoke about their experience and why this role that they were hiring for really mattered to the business and how they thought about success. And it was a short, bite-sized video. I mean, I'm talking maybe 30 seconds, and it's along the lines of humanizing things. So what I'm hearing from Kristen and Tina as well is you have to strike the right balance of getting candidates to show up, particularly ones that might be more passive, while still, keeping them engaged, but knowing that you have to give back to them in the process too. So for thinking proactively around that collateral, my Meet the Hiring Manager campaign comes to mind as an example.
Kristen, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, to really, kind of bring a lot of what we've said home and summarize it, I think the branding is the piece that keeps candidates engaged, but to share it from a way that doesn't feel like a sales pitch or doesn't feel like branding, and being able to share, the employee experiences and being able to have those voices heard, and a genuine employer voice. So, Tina had mentioned Glassdoor. It's also really important to make sure that if there are bad reviews, are you kind of, showing candidates that you acknowledge those and you respect that feedback, and not that you're just, a lot of people will be like, oh, we respond to our, reviews on Glassdoor. And some of those comments are just, bot type comments, that are really generic and don't actually engage and highlight, what was said. So it's putting your best foot forward, whether that be sharing employee stories, pictures and videos go a really long way. But when a candidate's on, like Reddit or on somewhere, Glassdoor, looking at your reviews, what's your voice? How do you also engage in that sense? And what are you putting forward? So it's really from the video, the stories from inside, but also then how you're responding to the material that's out there and how the employer is engaging as well.
Great, great. And, Glassdoor has come up a couple of times. LinkedIn is obvious. But Kristen, you briefly mentioned Reddit, and I'm curious, for all three of you, please, where are you seeing action in social media? Is Reddit, is TikTok popular for recruitment purposes? Reddit, Instagram, where's the bang for the buck in your experience?
I hate to give this answer, but I'm going to say it depends. It really depends on your industry. It depends on the type of people you're attracting. If you're more tech-based versus more, potentially skilled trades or blue collar, there's going to be very different places where they go. So the first thing I would say is, who your great employees are. You know who your team is and who you're looking for. Ask them. Do an internal survey of what sites are you guys on? Where are you getting your information? Where do you find cool reels to share? We have one manufacturing company that, because of their market, they actually hired somebody to do just TikTok videos, and that's a big platform for them, from both the hiring, but also getting their to market and getting their products out there, and they're fully engaged there. And I can tell you, we have a variety of other clients that TikTok would not be the place for them to go. So I would say first and foremost, start with your employee base and find out what they're doing, where they're at, to be able to kind of get some of that insight to target where you want to target.
Great. Are you seeing generational differences when you talk to the employee base?
Absolutely. From a perspective of if they're utilizing technology and if they're on it, I know there's a lot of younger generations where, if you say you're on Facebook, they're like, oh, you're old, and that's already kind of seen as old. And then there's others that aren't even on it. So yeah, as you do survey your employees, especially if you have either a very diverse employee base or one way or the other, you might need to go out a little further if you tend to have an older generation base, to continue to do some additional resource. They may not be able to share all of that information.
Thank you. Barbara, did you want to add anything?
Know your audience, as Kristen said. So for us, that tech talent, Reddit's a big one. Also blind, which has definitely more of a negative connotation, but yeah, it's a platform where people can feel candid about their employers. And so I think just being aware of what's said and then how you use your platform to communicate, whether it be through your careers page or your Glassdoor. But Reddit's a big one in the tech world.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions that I want to pose to our panelists, and then we're going to open it up and see if our audience has any questions. So when we get there, I guess, Leslie, the easiest thing is if people use the raise hand function.
Yeah, either that or they can go ahead and put them into chat. We'll look at both as soon as you've spoken to the panelists. Sounds great.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Just to give the audience a chance to formulate their questions. So I want to go back to technology itself for just a minute. We've touched on ATSs, we've touched on data analytics, we've touched on predictive tools like assessments. And I want to ask our panelists, how would you put it all together? What's the optimal way to deploy those kinds of tools to help the hiring managers and yourselves make good decisions? Any one of you can jump in.
I'll just start. And I'm not Kirsten's definitely more of an expert on the technology part than I am. So, but I mean, really what Kristen was just saying earlier about looking at the company as a whole, who they are, if you're knowledgeable about all the different tools that are available, and just not all, but the ones, the key ones, the key types of tools that you want to use, then it's a matter of really understanding who that company is, the brand, and how you want to align and the types of people that they're going to hire and who's going to use certain tools and who won't, right? So you want to always leave that open. And so designing it around your needs and your costs, obviously. A lot of these tools are not that expensive, which is a huge benefit for once, right? ATSs are always expensive, but other tools like, these other AI tools and video tools, texting. By the way, we didn't mention texting. We use a tool that will send text messages to the applicants because often emails go to spam. So having that tool in your toolbox also, I know that's not what you asked, but I wanted to mention it, is also a great benefit. We've had a massive success from it. So just really aligning everything, understanding your brand, what you're trying to do, what you can afford, what makes sense, and testing out one thing at a time. So you make sure, you're understanding how it's working for you. Yeah. And just be open-minded to continuously changing and absolutely having somebody in the company, whether it's internal or external, somebody looking out for what's next because the tools are changing faster than we can think. And so it's unfortunately it's a constant within your whole business because AI can be used in so many ways to create efficiencies and make you better and it costs less. So yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you. Thank you. Barbara or Kristen?
Yeah,
can-
I would, oh, go ahead. Feel free, Kristen.
I'll kick it right back to you afterwards. So yeah, I mean, from you mentioned ATS, and there's so many different ATS platforms out there. Some that offer more tools than not. Some that say they want to offer something, and then when you actually implement it and use it, it may not be as good as you thought it was. So there is a lot on your plate. We're actually going through a huge ATS research project right now, as we're going to be upgrading, and there's a lot of options, but that puts a lot more on us. But some of the different ways that you really can capitalize and use from that, is there are obviously resume automated screening processes. We do have to be very careful with that. And I'm sure, well, who knows now in this climate, but there might be regulations to follow with that. But in terms of ranking, and not necessarily, we still want some human eyes on them. AI has not developed the tools it needs to make human decisions for us. But, to be able to rank and kind of filter your candidates, as Barbara said, kind of putting a weighted score on them and being able to visualize that way so that you can go after those real direct hits first, and then kind of understand that you're dealing with some of the peripheral around that. There's no excuse now for not optimizing your job descriptions and, checking them for bias and things, and that can be done right in your ATS. And then, obviously leveraging some of those integrations, whether it's with your background checks, and onboarding, or whether it's through assessments, or even your job boards that are out there. Back in the day, you used to have to download your resumes from Indeed and upload them into, and, now a lot of the ATSs, not even just with the job boards, but with some of the other platforms out there, with social media and everything else, we'll have different tools that are built in there. The other piece of that is the hiring analytics. Now that we have so many things that we're able to track, we really should be able to be pulling a lot of that from your ATS to kind of look at those numbers and identify where are your bottlenecks. What's happening, where are things being held up, how are you comparing in your dashboard and your metrics to some of the other industry averages. But one of the other things there is really monitoring engagement. So like one of our things, the way we know are our videos being successful? We have to be able to measure how many of those have been completed, how many have we sent out, how many are completed, and how many candidates are you losing at what stage of the process, and not necessarily just looking at, how many you have in the process, but those ratios, those drop-offs, and what is that telling you about the process that you can adjust to, or add more value to make an impact.
Yeah, it's all great advice. To distill it down, I'd say, where are you spending the most human time in the process? And objectively being able to say, is that the right choice for us? Is this the right use of human time? Because often with AI, it's synonymous with efficiency. And so I'd segment, at least within the recruiting cycle, the different stages. So that's from application or even your job ads, like the initial sort of advertising, to applications, to resume review, to recruiter screen, to different interviews, and like how much time are you spending on the human there? Could potentially AI be a tool to help drive efficiency within those existing stages? So kind of going through that process and asking those, I would say, 2 questions would be where I'd recommend to start and ensure that you're making the right decisions for your company.
Great, thank you. So I'm gonna end the prepared section of this by broadening out a little bit, because we've spent almost all of our time talking about technology and talent acquisition specifically. And I'd like to ask our panelists their thoughts, if they have any, on the broader looking at the broader talent management universe. What kinds of tools are you seeing either using yourselves or you're seeing clients use in the broader talent management space?
You mean like HRIS systems, Ken? Is that what you're?
HRIS or assessments or succession planning tools. It's a wide universe that you can comment on because talent management is a very big topic.
Yeah.
Let me start to get us going. So I'm a big fan of both behavioral and cognitive assessments for many jobs, not all jobs, but for many jobs. And I find that they make a huge difference in terms of the efficiency of the selection process once you've got a good candidate flow, because the tools will, you take the tool and apply it to the particular job. It's not a generic thing. You'll say, maybe I'm hiring a controller, and what kind of characteristics do I want a controller to be able to exhibit? What kind of cognitive ability do I want a controller to be able to demonstrate? And then apply that against the job. And then the thing I think Kristen mentioned it, some of these tools will take your candidate pool and rank them against the job based on these results of the assessment. I just wonder if any of you have had those experiences or other tools.
I'm going to borrow your moderator's hat and ask you what tools, because you might have tools that you like what tools are you using that you find are most beneficial?
I use predictive index.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's an oldie but a goodie, right? Like that's been around a long time. Yeah.
Well, and it's and not to do a commercial for predictive index, but I mean it's completely updated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I find huge value in that.
And I think to build off of kind of, where you're talking in terms of the entire talent management, when we look big picture, we're really being able to see performance management be able to grow into something so much more, with a lot of these AI tools from, mapping out what it takes to be successful, but having more accurate potential measures, when you check in with people from a performance management standpoint, tools you can now build and measure with employee engagement, really kind of building out a robust employee engagement. So now you can understand where your employees are coming from the happy quotient, through also understanding where their skills, where there are areas of challenge, compiling that data, especially, smaller organization that may not be as challenging to do. As you get into these larger organizations, getting visibility into that and being able to, call attention to either certain individuals or certain skill sets, that may need to be built, tie that into your learning management system and different trainings. You can really start capitalizing on a lot of that data to not only keep your team engaged, but to get them trained where they need to be to identify trends and patterns and things that you need to address as an organization, which, as you had mentioned, then goes into, even your succession planning, for the long term for the organization.
I'm just going to jump in and say, oh shoot, I forgot what I was going to. Give me a minute. Go ahead, Barbara. Let Barbara talk.
Yeah, Bright Hire is a tool that I'm a fan of. Talks about the evaluation of how your interviewers are showing up, how they're evaluating different types of transcriptions, recordings, things like that. And it can also help you just within the tool draft your job descriptions and whatnot. But when you talk about tools that help at multiple stages that feel not fully comprehensive, but solve multiple problems, multiple pain points at different stages, Bright Hire is one that I'm a fan of.
Okay, my 61.
Did you remember, Tina?
Yeah, I remembered. This is what happens. Welcome to old age, right?
Oh, it's growing up. It's not old age. It's growing up.
There you go. It's just information. One thing I just wanted to add, a lot of our clients, when we start with them, they have like an HRIS system through their payroll company. Like if they're with ADP or Paychex, a lot of the big ones, right? They offer an HRIS system that might have a module for everything. And that might be perfect. But I want to just mention that there are systems that you can use outside of your payroll provider. So you don't have to feel obligated to use that system. So many of them connect with others like a Bamboo HR. Oh, there's so many. I mean, I don't know the name of all of them, and there's probably more latest and greatest than I can mention. But I just want to mention that because sometimes people feel they have to use what their payroll's with because it's the only way to include payroll in their whole system, but you don't have to. And so we use many different ones. We're actually just adding on one that's we didn't like the performance management system that was in our ATS. So or in our, I'm sorry, HRIS, too many acronyms. So we are just implementing something called Lattice. That's supposed to be an exceptional performance management, an area to document performance overall, an area that employees can do 360s or give feedback on other employees. It's just like it's really cool, amazing tool. We're just starting with it, so I can't speak deeply about it, but there's all kinds of things out there. So don't feel stuck because you want the best, right? And sometimes the best isn't all in one place. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Thank you. And in fact, it occurs to me, I'm going to ask our panelists to do us one more favor. After we're all done today, if you could send either me or Stephanie an email with the names of the tools that you mentioned along the way so that we can share it with the audience. Would really appreciate that. Great. Good enough. So I'm going to get us to the participant question period here. So I want to open it up. But before I do that, I just want to mention Gary in particular. We've been talking about these tools from a talent acquisition point of view, but I will tell you, I also use these tools in my coaching practice, and I bet that you would benefit from it as well if you're not already. So it's more than just talent acquisition. You know, Kristen alluded to it. A lot of these tools can be deployed in different ways and at different stages in the whole talent management universe. But I'll shut up now and say, do we have any questions from the audience?
I saw one hand from Ruth.
Yep.
So we're a reasonably small nonprofit, about 80 employees, about 40 of them full-time, 40 of them part-time. So as a nonprofit, I'm always looking for free. And I know free isn't always available or worth it. And sometimes it's good to have, to pay the money and you'll get what you need. But if when you're giving the feedback on Lattice or all these other software programs that you're talking about, if you could give an idea of the expense involved, if you know it, or if you're aware of free stuff that's secure, if that exists, that would be really helpful.
Hey, Ruth, reach out to me separately because I might be able to help you with a freebie.
Thank you.
Anybody else have questions, comments, concerns? You love this, you hate it?
Chelsea.
So Chelsea?
Yeah.
It's hard for me to read.
Hi. So I am curious how other companies screen for longevity. We have our healthcare facility here, and CNAs, RNs, there's sign-on bonuses everywhere. They tend to job hop. It's partly the nature of the field, and we're always going to have to deal with that. But are there any questions or tools or assessments to help predict if they're more likely to stay, less likely to stay?
That's a great question. I can kind of jump in with, kind of a high level piece of it first. That is something that we look for as an organization. That's something that's really important to a lot of our clients. And you are in an incredibly challenging industry. My hat's off to you for what you deal with in that. And the competition is incredibly fierce. And I think from a hiring perspective, as I look over the years, and one of the things that I think is evolved slowly, but COVID actually kind of brought it back into light is tying things back to the mission, and what people are inspired by and what people want to show up for. One of the things that we do, early on is, we talk about values at every stage of our interview process. We screen on different values and build questions to understand what their values are, find meaningful ways to communicate our values and kind of sprinkle that throughout the process. Obviously, job tenure is a thing of the past to kind of look at to some degree, but, we do kind of measure that. But in our screening, kind of in our upfront, we also really look at what did you like, what didn't you like about previous jobs? Why did you leave those jobs? And don't just tell me it was the commute, you kind of probe a little further and find out, what those reasons are and really start driving some quality conversations around that. And that does take having a skilled interviewer, even for some of the lower level jobs, it can be very easy to just, hey, let's just have a quick screening process. But having those conversations that really dive into that and and not just get the information from the candidate, but be able to inspire and share, and then when you keep them engaged, through your onboarding process, and how are you checking in and kind of tying everything back to when they have those tough days, when they see a sign-on bonus, for an extra like 10 cents an hour, what's going to motivate them to stay and kind of tie them back into the mission and not think that the grass is greener.
That's good. I'd like to jump into that was excellent. Kristen can attest, I have an extremely difficult time with the job hopping thing. And it is right. And it's fascinating to me because a few years ago we were hiring for a COO and we got over 1,000 resumes because there are only so many COO positions, right? So to be expected. And we have a lot to offer. So out of that 1,000, over 70% change jobs every 2 years. And man, I'm not hiring a COO that's going to leave in 2 years. I'm just not going to do it. And so I held my ground, and it took us longer, but whatever, right? Because past predictors are, past experiences, the future is a potential for, you know what I'm trying to say, right? It's saying that I can't get out of my mouth, right?
Yeah.
But what I wanted to say is sometimes like, if they're job hopping, they're job hopping, right? I mean, that is it. Especially if there's, my experience been, if there's job after job after job after job, you can almost assume that's what's going to happen. Or they've been at one job a very long time. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to seeing this. They've been at one job a really long time. And after that, and before that, they've job hopped, which means they were able to exist in this environment, but somehow in these other environments, not so much maybe. Always a maybe, right? You don't want to just generally assume. But two questions I thought of when you said that is, I'll ask people, or I have asked people in the past, what do you think is an acceptable amount of time at a company before you change to your next company? Something like that, where you get them to tell you what's acceptable to them and give them don't give them any leads, just ask it straight like that. Same thing with time off. I know that's a different subject, but while you're there, what's an acceptable amount of time off? I mean, it's been years since I've had to do this kind of questioning, but I know we still use it. And it's pretty amazing when somebody says, oh, 3 times a month, that's no big deal. And you're like, what? Right? But at least you know what they believe. And and then we clarify sometimes in our job postings, you can clarify we're looking for people with a steady work history, 2 to 3, you can define it or you can just leave it at that, but make it prominent so that maybe some people screen themselves out. That's what I can offer. But I can tell you, I write a column, and I was doing a column for Inc. Magazine, and I did some research recently on this exact subject because it's such a sensitive one for me personally that I cannot believe that literally across the board on every job level, people are job hopping now. It's the norm, and I just can't get comfortable with it. And it's meeting the generational needs and also having a company. I won't go down a rabbit hole because I could, but having those values like Kristen offered earlier, true to those values, like again, making sure your social media, your careers page, everything all matches and that your reviews match, that you really have these values. But also, clarifying who works well at your company and making sure people see that. This is who fits in here, people that stay, and making sure that you're holding on to the good employees and letting go fast of the ones that are your poison, because nothing will drive away people more, and I'm sure you know that, than other employees that they don't want to work beside. I want to work with people that I like and that I have the same commitment or, whatever. I mean, there's always going to be some, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. But one thing I'm noticing, especially with the CNAs, is that they're working 3-4 different facilities at once. So if they just ditch one and never go back, they just leave them off the resume and nobody's any wiser because there's no gaps in their history. So it's almost difficult sometimes if they configure their resume properly to pick out the job hoppers unless you trip them up in a question in the interview, or just get a sense from their answers that they're a little shifty, or yeah, it's been difficult. But then being a continuum of care, we also have independent living. So we're hiring 17-year-old servers who have no experience at all. And they might leave because they were asked to put their phone down while they're not on break in the middle of serving, and they just never come back. So it's hard. So these questions will be helpful, though, I think, even gauging where their mindset is at on what they find acceptable. And if their acceptability levels do not match ours, it's not going to work.
I have one more question for you then, and you brought up a great, excellent subject. Often if you do a criminal background check, it might show, like depending on where you're getting reporting from, it might show some of their past jobs. So you can use a question, excuse me, such as, if you are chosen for this job, hypothetically, the next step would be or a step would be to check your references and background checks. When we run that, we'll be able to see, where you've worked and what you've done. Is there anything that you would want to share with me that might not be on your resume that might come up? So you're acting like you're helping them out. And then you're giving them, you're giving them an olive branch to try and come clean if they left one off, but then you can dig into those jobs. So we use that all the time. Well, not exactly as I said it, but we use a question very similar in, we will be checking your references. When we call this company, what will they say about you? And when you say it in that present tense, like you are going to do this, not you might do it, but you are, I can't tell you how well that works. Like they will start, oh, well, they might say this, but here's why, and then you just got to listen and decide for yourself, right?
Sure. Thank you.
I want to give Barbara a chance to jump in, but before I forget, Tina, if you could share that column you wrote.
Oh, yeah.
We can share that with the participants as well.
Yeah. Okay, I will.
Sorry, Barbara, I didn't want to lose the thought.
You're fine. And Chelsea, I think the challenges that you're articulating are very real and frankly, probably not going to change. Company loyalty is not there, and it's not going to be. And so I think all the advice that's been shared here is very sound from an employer standpoint to understand what you're going to get from the employee. It is an interesting mental heuristic in these conversations with potential candidates. What helps you stay at a company long term? What type of growth and connection do you have with the work? What are you looking for in your career? It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be positioned to deliver on all those fronts, but even turning it back on the candidate, it makes them feel heard. It makes them articulate out loud what will help them stay. And you get to know them still through that process, whether they are someone who just wants to find the right long-term role, but they just haven't in the past. And so I like having the duality to that because I also think it steps towards some sense of loyalty. It's not going to be what it was 30, 40 years ago, right? But steps you towards that direction.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. So I'm going to wrap up this portion of our program. I know Stephanie has some remarks that she wants to add, and I think Leslie, you have a close as well, don't you?
I do.
So I'll turn it over to Stephanie. And before I forget, profound thanks to our panelists. I think you added a mountain of value to our audience, and really grateful for your time. But please, Stephanie.
I am echoing that actually. Thank you so much to Barbara, Tina, and Kristen, and thank you to you, Ken, as well. And thank you to all the attendees. We hope that we have provided some valuable insight to each of you, and that you feel you're walking away with tools and resources that you can begin using right away. Over the next few weeks, over the next few days, sorry, we'll be compiling some summaries of today's discussion and some guides for you as well, and resource sheets. So if you provided your email on registration, keep an eye out for those within the next week. Leslie?
Great, wonderful. Yes, I just want to say, Tina, Barbara, Kristen, wonderful job. Ken, great moderating. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for helping to set this up for us. It was really a great conversation. I've got lots of questions, so I can't wait for more information to be shared on this, and really appreciated a couple of things that you said. the whole marketing piece, when I went on the SHRM website, they said, gosh, if you get a recruiter without some strong marketing, you're going to have to upskill them. And I heard that loud and clear. And I really liked how you brought forth the importance of the mission, the vision, the values. And then also asking the candidates questions, finding out what keeps you at a place, what are some of the things you're looking for so you can stay long term in an organization, or, maybe not in that way, but like what is going to make you buy in and stay at an organization. So I think it's so important to maintain that people element. Our organization, Ocean State Job Lot, we recently joined, and I didn't know the name of it. I think it's Phenom. They sent it to me. And that is being used for our recruiting. And what I said back to them was, I go into the stores and I talk to the new hires. And what I hear from them is nothing about the hiring process. It's about their interaction with the recruiters and how they felt that was the one thing that made them feel it was the right company to join. So I'm really happy that you're looking at the efficiencies and not taking out the human piece. And I think that's like a challenge for all of us, because we want to be efficient. But it was a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much. I'm sharing in the chat right now the opportunity to submit for HRCI and SHRM credits. So if you are a participant and or attendee, please take note. If you're looking for credits, those are the codes that will get you the credits. And thanks again to everyone for participating today. Look forward to seeing you at our upcoming events.
For having us.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you all.
Bye all. Have a
Day.
great day.
Great
And
job.
happy spring tomorrow.
Happy spring.